Creating bedding areas on your property can be one of the most powerful habitat management tools that you can employ on your land to get it to hold more deer. But where do you start? Well, today I'm going to head around the farm and I'm going to talk about the different terrain features that I like to look for when determining where to cut in bedding areas. All right, we'll start with what's probably my favorite one, and that's benches on ridgelines. So you can see my hill goes up right here. What happens is it comes down and it makes a little bit of a flat bench right here. Now, I'm not in big hill country, so sometimes these benches are really pronounced if you're in hill country. Here it's not super pronounced, but what happens is I got my hilltop up there, comes down, and then it flattens out and then keeps dropping down into the valley below. Benches, especially southerly facing benches, may be the best terrain feature to look for when it comes to cutting in bedding areas. So you can see right here, I got a big old bed, and if we look at the deer's view, when they're bedded here, they can sit and watch out over the valley below, but they have the thermal protection of the hillside behind them, because my northwest wind is coming from that way. When they're bedded down on this bench, they don't have to worry about eating that cold northwest wind. Any spot where this hill flattens out, I'm seeing beds. There's a bed right there. Big old deer bed right there. So they're looking for their flat spots where they can sit and they can look out over that southerly exposure. Now, this particular bedding area was cut in via logging. You can see there's a hinge tree right over there, right next to my big bed right there. So I did do a little bit of cutting post logging in here, but the big thing to create this bedding area was just removing the mature timber and getting some regen on this hillside. Right now it's blown up. I got tons of Canada goldenrod in here, which is still holding late December. The woody regen is coming. You can see it, especially back in there. It's getting thick. But the biggest thing was just opening up this hillside, opening up these little flat benches that exist along this hillside, letting the regen come, and making sure there were nice big open spots for the deer to bed down. I could sit and watch this hillside from one of my deer stands this fall, and it was loaded with deer. I watched a ton of deer come out of here. It was probably the best bedding location in this particular woodlot. One more big old bed right there. You can see the deer scat. Talk about a bulletproof spot to bed. They can watch all that below them and feel protected from behind, because when that northwest wind's coming, they can scent check all that. So if anything's creeping up behind them, they're gonna know. They'll smell them coming. All right, spot number 2 are these swamp transition areas. So you can see I got a big old marsh right over there. If I pan this way, I'm high and dry. So when I'm looking for good swamp transition bedding areas, I'm looking for islands in a swamp, points or peninsulas in a swamp, or just a true transition where a hardwoods meets a marsh edge. Those spots are absolute money when it comes to cutting in deer bedding. Basically, you're just looking for high and dry in the swamp, and those are your best spots to cut in bedding. It can be, I'm guessing there's a 6-inch to 12-inch transition right here, but this spot is dry and that's wet. So this is where the deer are going to want to bed if they have good security cover. So this spot clearly isn't cut in yet. It may be a bedding area eventually, but if I were to cut this in, I would focus my cutting out towards the edge right here, but also give them a look out over the marsh. Because when you find these dry transitions, the deer love bedding on the edges so that they can see out over the marsh and look for danger. So if you have a wet property, but you have a bunch of little islands out in your wet areas, those can be dynamite bedding locations, and it's very predictable where the deer are going to want to bed in that scenario, because they're not going to bed wet. So if you give them the cover up on any type of high ground that's in your marsh, they'll absolutely bed there. Great locations to cut in bedding. All right, location number 3. Flat bottoms. Flat bottoms can make for some really good bedding. So this particular area, just old pasture, has a handful of oaks in it, and there was a lot of young native shrubs that wanted to kind of get a chance at life. So what I did is come in and I basically did a TSI cut in here. I cut down all the junk. You can see the down trees in here. Punched a hole in the canopy and started to let that native regen come. And you can see it's starting to get really thick, especially around the edges, with some thick shrubby cover. And you can see right now the traffic's very heavy in here. I'm in a spot where 4 trails intersect. Got one there, one there, and then this is kind of the main one coming into it. So the deer want to be in here right now because they have excellent thermal protection. Basically, it's a flat bottom that kind of makes a bowl, but it's flat. It's not, you know, a spot that would hold water or anything like that. It's nice and flat, and the hill slopes up all the way around it. So they like tucking in this area because they can get out of the wind, but it also gives them a nice flat spot to lie down. So I came in, cut out the junk, released my nice oak trees, and this has become just an awesome bedding area that's full of good native regen. I also did kill out the buckthorn in this area. And I see a lot of that down here. That's a pretty big tree. Nice rub. Oh, got a grouse right up over there. So when you cut this stuff down, it doesn't just benefit the deer. I see grouse down in here. I've seen pheasants down in here. You know, they love this. They like the thermal protection too of being able to get out of the wind. This particular location has probably been our most consistent location for buck bedding. They love this spot, especially early season. Within that first week of bow season, there's a nice big deer bed. Within the first week of bow season this year, we should have shot probably a 150-inch buck that came out of here. Didn't end up working out, but we had our chance at it. And we have killed bucks coming out of here with the bow. We've seen some absolute dandies. And all we did was come in here, I think maybe a day of chainsawing, open it up, let the native shrubs come. I mean, this area is loaded with nannyberry, gray dogwood, hawthorn. There's some prickly ash that comes in here, which is, it's fine. At least it's native. And lots of nice big mass producing oaks. So open up the oaks, let the native shrubs come, and this has become just a fantastic bedding location on our farm. All right, fourth location I like, ridge tops or points on ridges, military crests on ridges. When I got that kind of topography where the deer has the advantage, they can be bedded high and they can be watching out over the valley below. I love being able to cut in those locations because that's where the deer want to be. You can see here, got a big old bed. Got cover behind the deer. If I get down in the deer's view here, they got a great look kind of out over the valley below. So when you have a long running ridge, or you have just high points in the woods, kind of knolls in the woods, or points coming off of a ridge, those are great spots to cut in because naturally that's where the deer want to be because they feel like they have all the advantage. Again, a spot like this, northwest coming over the deer's back, so they can scent check behind them and look out over the valley for danger. In this particular spot, there's actually been times when this wasn't as thick as it is now, which we made it thick with the chainsaw, where we could look in at this exact spot and we've seen bucks bedded right here. Because when you think buck bedding, I mean, they always pick the best spots where they feel like they have the most advantage. This is a spot where a buck would have an advantage. So we've seen bucks bedded in this location just because of the high level of security they have, being able to scent check and watch over the valley for danger. Quick bonus tip, if you can add in conifers to your bedding areas, absolutely do that, especially up here in the north. You can see I got a handful of them scattered through here. Boom, boom, boom. Bucks where deer and especially bucks love honing in and bedding next to these isolated conifers. So they give you a little thermal component in your bedding, but and a little bit of diversity and just really, really nice bedding structure. So they're not going to bed deer yet, but 5-6 years down the road, those things will start to make some nice bedding structure and really complement the work I've done in this bedding area. All right, spot number 5, or terrain feature number 5. Let's say that your ground is flat as a pancake, no clear topography, no swamp transitions, nothing like that. This is something that you can do in a situation like that. All right, you can see out in front of me, I got a food plot right there. Some good screening, good edge feathering right there. And as I pan into the woods, I have excellent bedding right out towards the edge of the food plot. Food there, bedding up in here. Now, I love pulling bedding out towards the food, because what happens then is I pull my does out closer to the food and I leave the potential back in the timber for more buck bedding. If I can get those does out towards the food, what ends up happening is they get out on the food sources earlier. It gets that buck movement going a little bit earlier, and I have potential for daylight buck activity on my property. Another positive to that is this is very, very predictable doe bedding. And this spot, this particular location, was absolute fire during the rut this year. On November 9th, I watched 6 different bucks basically cruise through the bedding, because I got bedding here. I have some more bedding that's out towards the edge over that direction. And there is bedding back in the conifers. Deer do bed in conifers, especially in Minnesota. But what happens is the activity filtered right through here, and it was bucks. They were coming in here, they were dogging does, and they were scent checking this area for does. On November 5th, I should have shot one of our target bucks. He came right through this bedding cut. He was right there 20 yards away, cutting up through here, and he was supposed to turn left. I normally have a vine right there, and a different buck had ripped it down. So if he would have turned left, I would have had a 20-yard shot right there. Instead, he stayed and went that direction, stayed in the thick cover, nose down the entire time, but he was clearly in here looking for a doe. And actually, I could have shot him on the 9th, or no, the November 10th too. I was walking to this stand, changed my mind last minute, and then the old cell cam dinged, and he was right up there 60 yards away. That was during rifle season, so it would have been a pot shot. So had my chances in here. This spot was absolute fire during the rut, but this, when you put the cover right next to the food, it creates a very, very predictable doe bedding. And what that ends up creating is very, very predictable buck movement during the rut. And it also gets your deer activity just moving out to the food sources a little bit sooner. So as long as I'm not sitting right over this, you know, if I had a stand out towards the edge, I wouldn't put it right on the edge of this bedding and be sitting it in the evenings and be bumping deer out of here. I got this stand in here, and it's a morning sit. We have huge food sources out that direction. I'm able to cut through the switchgrass and cut over this little food plot. I still have yet to bump a deer in the morning. Normally, I wouldn't advise cutting over food in the morning, but in this spot, it works. And this has been just an absolute money location during the rut in the morning. Kind of a bonus tip here. Again, if you have a flat property and you just don't have great terrain features, another good spot to cut in bedding is where you find a location where 2 different habitat types meet. So here we got thick conifers meets the hardwoods. So if this was a blank slate, I'd be looking at laying out some bedding along this conifer transition. Deer are creatures of edge. They love hanging out in locations where habitat types transition. So this would be a great location to cut in some bedding. And this is just kind of an extension of my bigger bedding cut that goes down here. But anywhere along this conifer transition would be a good location to cut in bedding. So if your property does not hold deer, you don't have good deer bedding on your property, look for these different terrain features, bust out the chainsaw, and start to change your property for the better. Chainsaw is by far probably the biggest difference maker when it comes to whether or not a property holds deer. Guys that get at it with the chainsaw are the ones that are going to start to see the results and actually hold deer on their land. All right, thanks for watching. Y'all take care. God bless.